welcome everyone. Guess we want to start. Do we have a visitor? I can't tell. No? Okay. All right, so let's start with the prior meeting minutes. Any?
So moved.
Okay. We have any second?
I'll second.
Okay, all right. Any discussion on the minutes, corrections? It looked good to me.
Yeah, thank you to Stephanie for incorporating my comments, but I'm not going to vote since I wasn't in attendance last
Okay.
meeting, I guess, for prior minutes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, minutes are approved. Okay, old business. Stephanie, any updates on any change on the 2021 budget?
No changes on the budget. The requests of the committee are being incorporated.
Great. Okay, let's move on to any question. Anybody have any questions on the budget? Questions, concerns? Okay. All right, moving on to the investment policy. Tom, what's the latest on that?
Sure. So I incorporated some changes, edits, as suggested by a few of us. And it was basically yourself, Ed, Joe, and Colleen. And Colleen, we missed you last time. So appreciate any other clarification as we go through this would be helpful. But I tried to capture all the input. And so in the document I sent all of you, I highlighted in red or red, or yeah, it was red basically, what changes were made in the document. And there was other highlighted two spots, which I'll come to specifically in magenta, which is something we should discuss, at this time. But the red highlighted items were again incorporating either clarifications, some simple edits, or meaningful input from all of you. So if there's any further comments around that, I'd welcome that, and it would be helpful for us, getting to a final document.
Ed, this is Sinclair. I do have a comment.
Sure.
It's really just the second line of the introduction. I am just wondering if it's appropriate for us to actually say an understanding between Doylestown Township, the Pension Advisory Board, and external independent investment advisor. Will we not be recommending this to the supervisors? And really this will be an investment policy between the Doylestown Township and the advisors, not the PAC.
Well, that's an interesting question. That's probably for Stephanie. Who do you think I have no idea. Is it the who should be there?
It's probably ultimately the Board of Supervisors. You're an advisory volunteer board to the Board of Supervisors. So they're ultimately the fiduciary, and therefore they most likely will be the ones that would enter, have the policy be their policy. I think in terms of wording, we can always, when we get to that point, I think the solicitor will certainly chime in and provide you the necessary guidance.
Right.
Yes.
I mean,
If I could add,
go ahead.
that came up when I was reading it, and in certain areas it said, township /PAC, and I think it really should be, as Stephanie said, the Board of Supervisors, because they're ultimately the ones that change things.
Right.
Okay. We recommend, we're a committee. So anywhere in that doc where there's a reference to Board of Supervisors / PAC recommendation or approval, it really should be BOS.
Right.
That-
And
Right,
they
Ed,
should-
I think
This
that's
is
where I was
the
coming.
investor.
Sorry, Ed, I think that's where I was, coming from, because this document we would be sort of handing over to the supervisors and Mr. Garton to review. This is our advice.
Well, that's right. I agree 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I was gonna say, no, that, I mean, we could, I can feather in something to that effect, but it's ultimately, I would say the solicitor, whoever reviews this would possibly be in a better position to render a judgment on the exact language. I thought it was important to mention the role of the PAC, because we're driving a lot of the detail in this document, i.e. some of the reporting we want to see. And so there is reference, the PAC comes up in here. So obviously the Board of Supervisors is not involved in the details, and dare say the minutia that we are with the advisor. So I just wanted to make our role clear, but certainly the Board of Supervisors, it probably needs to be highlighted.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we're kind of doing it. We're helping the Board of Supervisors, but you know, I think we have a lesser role. You know, even in terms of the minutia. I mean, certainly they're going to get the reports. You know, but we're the ones, and certainly they should review them. But you know, we in parallel are reviewing them too.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, even in terms of some of the specific reporting requirements that are in this document, I don't want to say it's beyond the Board of Supervisors, but they're clearly not intimately involved with details at that level. You know, we have a primary contact with the advisor on a regular, ongoing basis. And so, I mean, we're basically a proxy. We're a proxy of the Board of Supervisors in that. So the exact language.
Yeah,
I'm not a lawyer, so.
I don't know if I see us as a proxy.
An advocate. I use the word advocate.
Yeah, advocate, advisor. I think we're an advisor.
Okay.
You know, it's really between the township and the. I mean, you know, the Board of Supervisors and township could reject all of our suggestions here and put in what they want. We're just trying to give them advice.
I was reluctant to use the word advisor for fear of confusion with the external advisor. I could call this an internal advisor.
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah. Yeah, we'll have to come up with a good word for that for our role. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with a word for us. But yeah, I mean, I think similar to the title of our committee, we're an advisory board.
Okay.
If I could give my 2 cents,
Sure.
the bottom line is the Board of Supervisors, and Jen's online here, plus whatever. They're the ones that ultimately make the decision. They were
Right.
elected officials. Okay. We can make the strongest recommendation to them based on our collective efforts, and say, this is what we think the township should do in terms of the pension.
Right.
If they want to turn their backs to it, fine. If they want to embrace it, fine. But we're an advisory committee, unpaid volunteers. Enough said. And I think Tom has done a tremendous job on the IPS. I don't think there's, other than the few, wordsmithings, I think it's a go-getter.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Yeah, Tom's done a fantastic job. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree 100%. So, and Joe, I agree with what you said also, is at the end of the day, it's really the township / board of supervisors who are really sort of on the hook for this stuff.
Right. I think it's the township and the board of supervisors investment policy statement. We're the ones saying that this is what we're going to be beholden to,
Right.
or at least this is the directive that we want to give our advisors. So, except for when there's like specific items that maybe you want the board of supervisors to have the PAC look at, but
You know, well, then they can certainly, I mean, which in essence I think is happening. They kind of delegate it to us. Maybe they get something, they say, hey, can you tell us what you think? We tell them what we think, and then they kind of decide, well, we agree with what you're saying, or we disagree with what you're saying. We're gonna do it this way.
right. But when it comes to ownership of the policy statement, it's definitely the supervisors and the township's
Yeah.
ownership.
I agree.
I use the phrase in the very first sentence, pension advisory board. Is that appropriate, or should that just be board of supervisors, Doylestown Township, comma, board of supervisors?
Yeah, that's the way I was reading it, Tom, to be honest, is, before there was the PAC, from what I can remember, the Board of Supervisors have a pension advisory board by mandate. And it really just consists of members of the Board of Supervisors, and that's the pension advisory board.
Well, yeah, and
So they're
actually,
one of the
and a
same-
representative from the union and the uniform and non-uniform. too.
Right,
That's
and the
what
two
this
reps.
is.
And then when I went further to read it, the next paragraph defines our committee. So I
Right.
was delineating the two, but that I could see where it could be confusing if you're not aware of the history, or if that even is necessary to have pension advisory board in that first line. Perhaps you just do identify it as the Board of Supervisors or the township. That's the way I was looking at it.
Yeah, I think we ought to be mentioned in this role, in this thing, but our
Right.
role needs to be clear that we're not the
Right.
primary.
And that's how I read it with
Yep.
that second paragraph.
If I can make a comment, I think, this is going to have to pass legal muster, and we can make it township advisory, whomever. But let's let the legal guys wordsmith who's what, where, and when.
I agree, but
I think we have,
yeah.
I think we have the basis down.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any, in my mind, there's nothing that needs to be changed. I think it's now at wordsmithing,
Yeah,
and the
I
legal
agree.
guys at the township level can do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would add is I would tweak that thing in the reference at the first. We're not the investment. It's really the township and the board of. I guess yes, the township. I guess. So let's put a placeholder in there for now, and I think we've covered. I think we're all in agreement. Any other comments?
Because even on the mention of the PAC comes in and out of this document.
Right.
It's on page 2, right about in the middle. I made a change here, the investor under the advice of the PAC and current advisor.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm acknowledging, let's see, the role, I dare say the initiation, that I see we took to get this discount rate issue addressed.
Right.
So I said I'm acknowledging the fact that we were involved with that, but obviously we had to I dare say the consent of the advisor, but the advisor was on board with that.
Well, yeah. So we actually, not thinking about it, who also suggested it, the target discount rate was also Kennedy. He agreed with us as well, so we probably should reference that. What's Kennedy, Stephanie? What's Kennedy's formal role?
They're one of the consultants, the pension
Oh, pension consultant. That's right.
He's a
Pension
consultant, handles all
Yeah.
the the AG forms and
Yeah.
compliance with the Act 205 and 600.
Right. So maybe we should add that in there, Tom, just
Consultant, yeah.
for completeness, pension consultant.
The formal title of Kennedy or the firm is what? Perhaps Stephanie, you could send me that on the site, just so I have the precise
I'll have to look at his.
precise identification.
Yeah, you might
yeah.
even just want to, you might just want to, on that page, just say, under the investor, under the advice of the PAC and current advisors, or say consultants, because you could consider Deb a consultant. Again, not naming specific service providers so that this policy can outlive any other service providers on the plan. I don't know if I would name Kennedy or even name Deb Breeden.
Deb.
Well, actually,
I think that's a
what-
very
Say
good idea,
currently, Deb
Colleen,
Breeden.
is
I know you
just
say
because you want this to
currently.
be a document that lives
Yeah.
beyond, a year or two.
Right.
So I think
Well,
just
yeah, I mean, it just-
referencing consultants
Mhm.
and advisors to the township are is probably best.
And the attorneys certainly would weigh in on that, again, to Joe's point, and I think everybody understanding, we have to go through legal review. But I would probably not name any of our consultants in this document.
Well, actually, I'll be honest, I lean sort of the other way. I understand that this should live, the intention is that it lives beyond, but potentially beyond, maybe using Brady or Kennedy, et cetera. But I personally like the fact that it references in there so it's clear who's involved here. And then I personally think that if something changes, then this gets updated and reissued. I mean, the core 99% of it or 95% of it doesn't have to change. But I actually kind of like the idea of having the people.
Well, it would simply be an amendment with the
Correct.
advisor is changed.
Exactly.
Do that. I mean, from my experience, there's two documents. There's a service agreement between the parties, and that's where the people are named. Then there's an IPS for this is the policy of the fiduciaries on the plan, and there are not named consultants or service providers in that document.
Well,
So just a recommendation, but
yeah, Colleen, actually, you
It's
make an
kind of
interesting,
splitting
you make an
hairs.
interesting point. It is, I think this came up in the last meeting, is right now, there currently is not a service agreement between the township and Brady.
right, because we were under first commission structure with her.
Again, I'm not sure what that means, but what does that mean?
Well, she was compensated through
if
commission.
I could interject.
Oh, hold on, let Colleen finish, please. Go ahead, Colleen.
Well, I think when the plan was established with her, it was set up under a non-advisory structure. She was not a registered investment advisor to the plan. That's where the
Okay.
service agreements come into play.
Okay,
When you set up independent advisory structure. I believe that the agreement is between the RIA, which is Commonwealth, and us. She is Commonwealth is the registered investment advisory firm, and that's who you enter into the agreement with. She is a representative of that advisory firm. So we pay the fee to Commonwealth, and they pay her.
okay. Well, that's interesting. So actually, maybe this, does this suggest that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
If I can interject, this is an investment policy statement. It's a township level. It should be generic.
Yep,
There should be no references to advisors, et cetera, just what the township wants to drive the investments in the pension. So my 2 cents.
right.
Well, what Colleen said and what you're saying, I think I'm changing my thinking, but and the reason why is that I'm thinking that maybe we need a second document, this quote unquote service agreements, which doesn't exist right now. which would have all the appropriate references.
Well, I mean, I don't know that it doesn't exist. I think it's old and probably should be updated.
No, actually, no, it doesn't exist. We learned that last meeting. That's right, Stephanie, right?
Well,
I don't recall. I'd have to defer to Ken. So I
Yeah,
don't think we have a
Ken,
specific
think-
one with Deb.
there's one with Commonwealth. We have an agreement with Commonwealth as the advisory firm. That's what the original, that's the document that had the really old, where we were to be able to identify what her fees were.
Well, I guess where I'm going, and maybe I'm using the wrong terms, or the inappropriate terms, is that right now I think there should be some sort of written agreement between the township and Deb Breedy that could reference the IPS. Tom and Colleen, you're the guys, the experts, so.
Yeah, I mean, we have the IPS that was previously prepared by Deb and adopted by the township.
Right.
Mhm.
And,
But then-
and that's outdated and it needs to be updated, but I think you're kind of trying to, what I'm getting, and it's
co-reference.
difficult to write these minutes as is you're trying to merge like 3 things into one.
No, actually, no,
offense.
actually, I'm not
And
trying to merge, I'm not trying to
Let's
merge it.
stick with
I'm
the IPS and make, see
yeah,
where
I'm not
you're
trying-
at,
I'm not trying
just
to
with the
merge it.
IPS and deal with everything. that
Yeah,
you-
no, I'm not trying to merge it. I'm trying to suggest that we probably have another, we should try to initiate a second document. Call it the service agreement, or an agreement between, the contract between Deb and the township. That's what I'm suggesting, not in one document, but drafting it, or,
But I thought you guys were intending to go out for an RFP for Deb's services. And
Well-
so you may have, you're right, you may have another document, I don't, but it may be with another vendor in the
Right.
future.
well, that's true, but shouldn't we have, I mean, it's overdue having one now. I mean, why
Yeah,
wouldn't
I mean,
why
if
wouldn't
you're
we
gonna
have one now?
start fresh, you're gonna start fresh, so.
Well, on that,
Hello?
well, so hold on, Joe, I got you. Is, my opinion is that it's a, I mean, I guess I understand why the one doesn't exist now, but certainly one hasn't existed before, but certainly someone should exist now, and we don't know if we're gonna change for Deb or when we're gonna change. So I'm thinking there should be an agreement. Anyway, go ahead, Joe.
I think we're talking about an IPS right now. We're not talking about contracts with whom the IPS directs our services to. That's a separate issue. I
No,
think
I understand.
we need to focus on the IPS. The IPS needs to be generic. It's not
I
Brady,
agree.
it's not anybody else. So let's just concentrate on the IPS. And the fact that Brady is in the mix is not pertinent to the issue.
All right,
We need to make
I
an-
agree with that. So what we'll
So,
do is we'll
so
finish.
let's go through the IPS and agree on what the wording should be. And then secondarily is who services us. That's another issue. My opinion,
so-
2 cents. Amen.
I agree. So what I'm gonna suggest we do is we pick up this discussion at our next meeting and try and have a discussion about whether we need a service agreement or a contract or whatever. So we'll take that up at the next meeting. So we'll just focus on the IPS for now.
I was gonna say, my first version of this did not mention Breedy. And I was thinking, as Joe had mentioned, keeping this totally generic. And then I'm not quite sure why I decided to include her name in there, because it does appear at the very last page in terms of the acknowledgement where the township signs and the
Right.
external advisor signs.
Yeah.
But to Joe's point, I do agree. The focus of the document should be on investment policy. Should we retain another external investment advisor through an RFP? That external investment advisor will probably, if you will, bring with them their own custodian. So Commonwealth will be out of the picture. The assets will be transferred. If this investment advisor is working on Charles Schwab platform, so be it. If they're working on Fidelity platform, so be it. Vanguard, et cetera. So the assets will transfer over out of Commonwealth at that time. But that's a whole different discussion to
And at
Joe's
that point,
point.
Yeah, so
At that
we'll continue that next month.
Yeah.
So let's just focus on the IPS. So I guess what we're all saying is that this should be, the IPS should not mention investment advisors. It should just reference the
That's fair.
township. I think we're on agreement. Everyone's in agreement with that, right?
Yeah, Tom,
Yeah.
I think the reason why you might have switched it back is because when she wrote the IFP, she put her name in there, and that was a smart thing for her to do at the time.
Yeah,
think
so
that's
she is, I don't want to say different, I was going to say motivations, but
Yeah.
she's writing it as a fiduciary. So there's different obligations. And this is language in here. So I don't want to jumpstart, but there's language at the back of this document that I don't think is really IPS relevant. It is more for the agreement part. And so that should be struck. When I have miscellaneous and other considerations on page 7. The custodial arrangements, portfolio security trades. So that's going outside of the I would say the framework of an IPS, and it's probably better placed in some sort of agreement down the road. So yeah, so I think keep being consistent with the kind of all-weather use of the IPS. It should be more generic in nature. So that's easily done.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm good with
The
that.
ones
So
that
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Who's talking? Oh, Stephanie's talking.
I was just going to say, Tom, I sent you a number of IPSs from other municipalities. Were those at all helpful to you?
Yes, they were. I gave them a kind of a once through. They're all different. There's no standard. What standard boilerplate really comes down to the core of investment policy in terms of asset allocation, the construction of the portfolios, restrictions, prohibitions, all of that, which we have in here. But they all kind of meander a little differently. And I appreciate that, Stephanie. You sent quite a few documents, and I will go back and take a further look at them. But I don't think we're not far off the mark with our own document, and the advisor's original IPS and then redraft again is written by an external advisor with fiduciary issues. And I didn't get that feel from reading the other township IPSs. It was they seem to be more consistent with what we're trying to achieve here.
Go.
If we're still on the document, Tom had added in magenta a paragraph about when the advisor can be terminated. Right now, it's my understanding that it's an at will termination. If we don't like Breedy, we just tell her go away. But I think Ken Wallace had mentioned it was one of the acts. I think it's Act, and Ken can correct me, but I think it was Act 44 where there is a need for clarification. Can we either? I didn't like the fact that there were like 3 options to get out of the contract. Either I'd like to make it a moot point, or if we need to include it in the document so that it's more open-ended. For example, if we find somebody that has a lower rate of payment plus additional services, we can just move if we elect.
I don't think we need to reference our reason, do we?
That's anything.
Is there a reason that we need to do that? Like where we would have to, because I think that would kind of, that would hamstring us, wouldn't it? To have to say we have to meet these criteria in order to you know, that is it.
I actually, I included that because I did see some IPSs, not the township ones. Yeah, I'm trying to think, not necessarily the township ones that Stephanie sent, but some other sample IPSs that they did have a termination language in it. I do agree with Joe, and I think Colleen had mentioned this in some of her comments back to me. This is more appropriate in the agreement phase.
Right.
This is
Yeah,
not an enforcement policy, so I have no problem with this coming out. We'll deal with this down the road.
Yeah, I would hate to limit our rights to be able to get rid of them if we didn't have to. It seems like I would like to be able to terminate them for whatever cause.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Joe, go ahead. What, Joe, you have something else to say?
I agree. I think my mind, we need to keep the IPS generic and all the other stuff as terms of contractual stuff. That can be in the agreement with the advisor, not in the IPS.
Yeah.
We ought to keep,
I think
we ought to keep the
all agree about
IPS
that.
as generic as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Tom, as you're taking this stuff out, if you could just kind of put it in a separate document or whatever, and as we discussed before, we'll take this topic up at our next meeting to say, you know, these are things that we want addressed one way or the other, and so we don't forget about it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would say along those lines, the only last comment I had was similar in that we're having Deb Breedy sign this policy of ours. And that I think we would refer back to in a contract with her and not this actual statement. I did look through, like, we don't sign an IPS for a client. We don't sign their IPS. Our agreement with them is a standalone agreement to invest according to their IPS, but we don't sign their IPS. So
Good point.
I don't know that I would have Deb Breedy sign it, but again, that's, you know, keeping it as generic as possible and not having a third party, essentially service provider, sign our policy statement. That's just my recommendation.
That makes sense.
I think maybe council would agree with that. And so if I included Debris and company, if you will, in the acknowledgement portion. So that's why I went back and identified her as the advisor at the front end.
Yeah.
But if we take her out of there, keeping it generic to Joe's point and to yours, Colleen, maybe the investment, maybe the external advisor doesn't have to sign this. But again, that's getting beyond, that's for council to maybe determine.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I think as Colleen had said, in any sort of contract or whatever the appropriate language, a separate document, a second document, third document, whatever.
Yeah.
That would be referenced in there, and that document would reference the IPS. Is that what you're saying, Colleen?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I just had a quick question. If and when we do get to agreeing this IPS, when would this potentially have the solicitor review this? What kind of time frame are we looking at?
When we're done.
No, but I mean, like, within the next couple months, or is this, because I'm thinking we're kind of, I know we're kind of leaping ahead with some other thoughts and stuff, but would it not just make sense to work on this one topic, see what the feedback is, and then make a move from that point?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're thinking about doing, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so basically get this done, get these issued. Go ahead.
Bill?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Joe.
go ahead.
Bill?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Ed Denton, myself, and Bob Salnick have been working on a task force since 2018. Things are slow to coming. We spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of brain power to get to this point. PAC did not exist prior to that task force. So All I can say is things will happen when they happen after thorough thought of many minds.
Yeah, so I think
completely
basically
understand.
the intention, I think, is the intention was that we get this done by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And at some time in the first quarter, when we're done, we would present it to the Board of Supervisors and explain what it is and explain what we did. And then as I understand from Stephanie, the solicitor would pick it up on behalf of the Board of Supervisors and review it, and then at some point it'd come back for a vote. Is that right, Stephanie?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's a
probably
pass.
I mean, I think that's the cleanest way to do it.
Yeah,
That way the
so-
board is introduced to the topic. They understand the work of the volunteer committee, and then they can direct the solicitor to take the document and make sure that it is legally appropriately put together for their approval as a
Right.
policy.
Yeah, and so that would happen, ideally sometime in the first quarter. Does that answer your question, Bill?
No, it absolutely does. And I'm sorry, I don't want to essentially go backwards and rehash the conversation.
No worries. It's a
I
good
just
question.
wanted
All questions are good. So we appreciate the question.
Yeah.
I usually stay quiet on things, but I just wanted to make sure that we're just getting an idea of a timeline. And I absolutely understand this has been going on for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Tom did some tremendous work in putting all this together, and it's all right in front of us now. So
Great. So please don't consciously try to, Bill, sorry, hold on, Joe. Bill, please don't consciously try to be quiet. We actually want you to participate
Yes.
and to represent the employees, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
we encourage you to participate.
I absolutely am here, and I'm taking in and observing and listening to things. No, but it looks like it's going in the right direction. I love literally the second page is outlining everything that we've spoken about over the past year that I've been involved in this. So
Great.
Great.
Joe, you got anything else?
Yeah, like I say, let me mention a few items in here that that I added. Most of the language was cut and paste out of either the current or the draft document. So, the language, the framework is generic in that sense. But let me just what I will do is let me point out, there's maybe 3 or 4 things worth pointing out. We can all look at those again, and we come back at our next meeting. And again, this is a push. We get closer, closer, closer each time. So what I will highlight to you are things that are new that were added. And most rest of the language, again, was cut and paste with some minor updating, and certainly should be read and reviewed. But essentially what makes this document different than the draft from the advisor? So the first thing is on page 2, where we elaborate, if you will, on the discount rate. And so that is new. That's laid out in the schedule as you see, and with some narrative underneath that. So that is a newer section of the IPS, if you will. The next point, the other area I would highlight. I've been a big advocate of us utilizing what I've called a reference policy benchmark, and I go to length below the boxed graph on the boxed table on page 3 to lay that out and kind of the whys and the hows of that. And this is just simply, this is a tool for us to look. So, with almost instantaneous results, we can see what a 65-35 is doing. Then we can look at what the performance of the portfolios have been. And again, use it as an overlay. The benchmarks are the benchmarks, of the strategies deployed by the advisor, and that's perfectly fine. But again, this is just another tool. So that part, the 2 paragraphs below that box in the asset allocation, that is new, and that all revolves around kind of the rationale, if you will, for the reference policy benchmark. The asset allocation itself is, I'm going to say it's cleaned up in the sense of, we talked about this. So, equities, fixed income. We have a desire to have a diversified global equity exposure. So we have domestic, we have international, it's there in total. The fixed income is a one-line item, just as it was in the prior IPS. Cash, I may need some guidance, and maybe Ken can be helpful. I don't know what the relevance of the cash account is in the pension funds. If that needs any further elaboration, I say the last sentence on the paragraph below that, I say cash is considered a sub-allocation of the fixed income asset class. I don't know if that's adequate enough. If you require, Ken, that we have something more there, that would be helpful. I guess what is missing here, well, real estate. So obviously we're not investing in hard asset real estate. The only real estate investments we make are proxied by real estate investment trusts, which are equities. So Brady had a line in here for real estate. The realities are real estate is part of the benchmark. So in other words, there's a real estate sector was broken out from the financial sector in 2017. And so we are investing in real estate by dint of our ordinary equity exposure. There's a real estate sector, obviously, for the US. It's called the 11th sector of the market. There's a real estate sector for international equities. So we are already investing in real estate. Now, should the advisor in their sub-allocation want to reinforce that and overweight real estate, they could do that. And actually, we are doing that. We are overweight real estate because we have 2 real estate ETF investments on top of what we already have invested through the indices, through the ETFs. So I thought that was redundant. And again, so we are, just by domestic and international global equities, we are already investing in real estate. I believe it's about 3% of the MSCI. But we are actually making additional investments of a couple of percent. I'm looking over my shoulder here. I think it's 2% in addition to that. That's fine. If the advisor sees that as part of their sub-allocation below this bigger asset allocation, so be it. But that's why you're not seeing real estate mentioned here, and you would have seen it mentioned in the prior document. So in that sense, it's clean. Global equities and fixed income, right there. The other change I would note, page 4, and this is something we did discuss last time, the portfolios, where we open up the flexibility that the portfolios may utilize a combination of passive low-cost ETFs and or actively managed external funds selected at the discretion of the advisor, applying both to equity and fixed income. And that was feedback I had gotten. Obviously, the way the portfolios are structured now, the equity portion are all ETFs and by definition passive in the majority. And the fixed income side is all external managers. So this, gives more flexibility, and it's not restricting to say equity passive and fixed income active or so. So that I would mention, and that was again direct feedback from all of you.
Let me ask a question. Is I know I don't know if we've had a full discussion on active versus passive. Because obviously there's different schools of thoughts. I personally think the township probably should have some level of active, but not be dominated by active. That's my personal opinion. What does everyone else think? Colleen, what do you think?
Well, I think there's room for both. And thank you, Tom. I think you incorporated some comments I had made and I wasn't able to attend the last meeting because I don't want to restrict an advisor that we hire and then give them a mandate because philosophically we believe it should be one or the other. So my thoughts are just that. I mean, I think the IPS needs to be flexible. We need to hire an advisor because they're doing what they do best. And we need to let them do it how they see fit.
Joe? Joe? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. My opinion is, we have to look at active versus passive, versus the total net. So if you have a passive account with a nominal 0.1% fee, but is yielding less than an active fund with a 5.5% fee, that's the way you go. That's why we hire advisors. Okay, so the advisor should be looking at those, and the bottom line is, what are we netting out of all these accounts? Not versus active versus passive. That's the advisor's job. And quite frankly, a former advisor used to mention that at a time when we would talk about returns.
Bob, your thoughts?
I think I'm where Colleen is. I mean, that's really why we're hiring the advisor. I want to see what the return is and that they invest within our policy, but I don't have a preference.
Tom, your thoughts?
Well, I think the flexibility is warranted. I personally believe we're in an environment now where active management is reasserting itself, quite honestly. And there are good active managers out there. The trick is picking them. And so some of these, if an advisor has been utilizing a fund or a series of funds or a family of funds, and with great success, we certainly would want to participate in that. And so not restricting ourselves just to the passive side. And so I think it gives more opportunity to Joe's point. It is the advisor's discretion, and the advisor will be judged on the sub-allocation decisions they make, ETFs or active managers. And that's our, I won't say that's our role, but that's a role we play, is in evaluating the efficacy of what the portfolios, how the portfolios are constructed against that. And could we have passive fixed income funds? Absolutely. So I think this is broad enough, and again, puts the onus on the advisor to do their job. And so I agree with that.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say, I mean, I agree with everything you guys have said. The only thing that I would like to see is a more of a dialogue between the advisor and the township about when they make those changes, that they're fully explained and vetted. So, I mean, I think by and large, according to Vanguard, that the index funds are the way to go. But and I generally follow that. But I have some portion of my investments are actively managed, and I'm personally comfortable with that. And I just want to make sure that the township is protected from an overly zealous high-risk advisor. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I'm not sure how to appropriately articulate that. Tom, you know what I'm saying? No, I agree. And
And so I don't want to say that's not been the case, but it's in my brief experience, it's been less the case over some of the justification for how we're positioned, put it that way. And hopefully we'll get improvement, on that as well. But we probably constrain ourselves too much by not having it open-ended. And
Okay.
again, it puts the onus on the advisor to make the proper evaluation.
Should we have any wording with just to say, that they have the flexibility, but they should keep the township informed, appropriately informed or something, what I'm saying, the rationale behind. I don't know, or maybe I'm just over engineering it.
Yeah.
Joe?
My point is, let's get on with the IPS. That's the basis, and we can worry about things about investing, contractual language, et cetera, with the advisors later.
Well, yeah, Joe, I was
think-
trying,
I
Joe,
think-
hold on.
I think
I was
Tom-
just trying to, hold on.
I think Tom has done a yeoman's job. I think we ought to take his document, make our recommendations for the next meeting and vote upon it and get on with it.
Okay.
Everything else is superfluous and is between the advisor and the township and not the IPS.
Joe, I agree with you 100%. The only question I was asking is whether there was a place for what I was suggesting in the IPS. It was a question.
Okay. Understand.
Okay. All right,
I
so
wanna
I
keep
think,
it as-
I think are we done with the IPS?
I want to keep it as generic as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just let me point out maybe two things. Page 5, second paragraph. So I put that in there by dint of our current experience with the advisor, that we're having difficulty getting a clear read, if you will, on performance. And it becomes, so that's a specific issue of performance reporting, which we're going to take up with another meeting next week with Breedy. But this is something we've been talking about and dare say requesting, but I think it's an important means by which we evaluate the discretionary decisions of the advisor. So the language in here is we need a composite benchmark of overall performance. And a composite benchmark of the related performance of equity and fixed income investments. So we kind of get a benchmark number, I guess is a blended benchmark number. But it's not broken out between equity and fixed income. So it makes it difficult to evaluate how the equity side of the portfolios have performed and how the fixed income side. That is not a huge ask or request. So obviously the total performance of the fund is a composite of two parts, the equity and the fixed income. But I do think it is important that we able to see this to distinguish if equities are contributing or if fixed income is detracting from performance in a period. And so that was an enhancement, if you will, from the experiences I have had, just in a short period with the advisor. And again, the paragraph that follows that is basically reiterating the same, but again, I'm bringing in this reference policy benchmark because actually, as the numbers stand, and we may touch on this as the next topic about the latest quarterly report. There's a pretty huge divergence between the reference policy benchmark.
Well, yeah, Tom, are you getting into performance now discussion?
Well, I don't want to.
Oh, yeah, so actually, I'd like to, because that's one of the things I'd like to get to as part of this. So let's finish up with the investment policy.
Yeah.
So I think we're all done with the input, right?
I just bring that in there because, again, so, the reference policy benchmark is looking from the highest level down.
Yeah,
And the composite benchmarks that the advisor will calculate are basically coming from the bottom up. So it's two looks at the portfolio.
yeah, I think we all like it.
And the other thing, the last paragraph in that section, it talk about rebalancing. And so I have in maroon, if you can distinguish, a rebalancing back to the normal weighting if the actual weighting varies by 2% or more from the current target. That 2% came from the draft and has been in the IPS. I'm in, is it should be 2%? Should it be 5%? I don't want to say I'm indifferent. I mean, the rebalancing issue should be addressed by the advisor, on a regular basis. Otherwise, we end up with a 70-30 portfolio or a 60-40 portfolio fairly quickly, which is not the intent of the investment policy statement. So, 2% seemed fair to me, and I know Breedy has been rebalancing intra periods from time to time, but
Yeah, I hear you. So I don't know. I mean, does anybody have a thought in terms of what that percentage should be? I guess I'm thinking maybe 3% because it's 2.5 would be right in the middle. Maybe 3 is the right number. Maybe 3 is a more appropriate number. Anybody have any thoughts?
If I can interject,
Go ahead, Joe.
2 to 3%. It's
Yeah.
a good margin, gives them some leverage. And quite frankly, if they deviate from that, we're going to be finding another advisor.
So 3%?
2, 3.
Yeah.
2 to 3.
Bob?
2 to 3 is fine with me.
Colleen?
I'm fine with that. You could go as high as 5. And, ultimately you are, again, that's why you're hiring that advisor, right? That's part of their job and you agree with them to be, monitoring the range. But, you could have a day in the market like you had today and I don't want them to go in and start rebalancing in this volatility, right? Where we might be able to, you just want to give them some leeway if need be, that's all.
So Colleen, if it were your decision, what would you suggest?
I would say 5. You got to give
5?
them a little bit of a range.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I have with Vanguard.
okay,
It's
Tom, your thought? Do we want to go as high as 5?
5 is fine.
Joe, you're good with 5? All right, let's go with 5.
And the last thing I will mention in terms of prohibitions, investments, and one thing, it's obvious because we're not investing in individual securities, but that is one big change. So much of the Breedy draft, the IPS and the draft document for Breedy labored on individual securities issues. And I think we're of unanimous agreement. We should not be putting money in Microsoft or IBM or Procter & Gamble. So it's ETFs for the passive side or active managers. So the number one prohibition is the top bullet is individually listed securities. And so that knocks out a lot of language that's just, it's not relevant to the IPS simply.
Okay, I'm good with that.
No, I think, and so that, and I said the miscellaneous part on page 7, I think all of that is something that starts stepping outside of the core of the IPS and is more of the arrangement contractual scenario.
All right, so we'll cut and paste this out and put it in a.
Yeah.
We'll consider that at our next meeting.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
So I will clean this up to the best of my ability.
Joe, good comment.
Yeah, the termination issue, how are we going to handle that? There were 3 points.
I think we're going to move that. I thought we were going to move that outside of the
I'm gonna
IPS.
take that out.
We're gonna take
Stay
that,
out of it.
yeah.
Right.
we'll deal with that in an agreement phase.
Right.
Okay,
So I'll scrub this up again. We're getting remarkably close, which is good. And again, every step is a win here. So we'll come back to this.
Joe?
Hi, Tom.
I'd like Nancy's and Jen's comments about what we've done so far. Are they in agreement so that when we go to the BOS with this, are they in compliance?
I think you guys are doing a great job. I think we're moving right in the right direction that I would want to go to, keeping things generic, making it something that we can carry on for a lot of years. I think you're doing a good job. I don't have any complaints at all.
Nancy?
I would agree. I think with what Jen said in terms of keeping it generic, I think the institutional knowledge that all of you have is fantastic. And also taking the time to meet with us as the Board of Supervisors and continue to do that is really helpful as we move forward. As Stephanie shared with you, we're trying to incorporate your recommendations. I'm still trying to catch up from things from 17 and 18 when you're putting your recommendations together. And I tend to ping you guys to ask questions as I'm learning, but I completely agree. We're moving forward, and I'm very grateful for all of your efforts and volunteer hours that you're being paid for. So I wish I could give you a raise.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're good with the IPS. Joe?
Shout out to Stephanie. She's there all the time, all the time.
That's true. Thank you, Stephanie.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
All right, I got one question on page 2.
Yeah.
The January 1st dates. 2022 would be the year that the discount rate would take effect. You would have to change it for the 2021 year because you have the Act 205 report basically on the odd years, the 21st, the 23rd, the 25th. So if you're going to go to 7 1/4, excuse me, you have to notify the pension consultant by January of 21, so that 7 1/4 will take effect in 22 for the MMO. So that's the comment I want, or the question I had for Tom. Is that the year you want to take effect, or is that the year that it's going to change?
I know Ed and I went back and forth on this,
Yeah.
and you see there was changes. I thought
Yeah,
I
well,
had the
I'm
right
not sure.
years.
So maybe what we ought to do, Tom, on here is maybe we make it a 3 columns or something like that, saying this is when the MMO, this is when the, we'll have to get the exact wording from Ken. This is when the MMO changes, and then what's the what do you call it? What happens in 2021, Ken? I can never get the wording right on this.
No, that's okay. We have our MMOs for 21, but
Right,
that's based on 19's report.
right,
Okay. So it's a movement forward. So if
Right.
you're going to go to 7 1/4, you notify them for the Act 205 report for 1/1/21, and that change will take effect for the MMO in 22.
okay.
It's like in
So-
23.
Could you send us an email, a sentence that we could drop in here so we can make sure we get it right?
Yes.
That'd be great. Thank you.
If I could interject.
Yeah.
I think the PAC has submitted something which the Board of Supervisors preliminarily have agreed to. So whatever the budget impact is, that's what should be implemented into the IPS.
Well, for 21, we had the MMOs plus 160,000. That's the preliminary budget plan for 21. And then for 22, you're going to get an MMO for, with the 7 1/4. Okay.
Yeah, so Joe, to your point, is Ken's going to give us the appropriate language to that is in line with the PAC's recommendation. Okay.
Agreed.
He can give us that phraseology.
Okay. And the other thing was, Tom, that cash, 0 to 10%, current target rate benchmark is 1%. It's been my experience, like she has some cash in Commonwealth, so she can move it over to the trustee, which is SEI, to pay the retirees their pension distribution.
Right.
Because there's not a lot of money over in SEI. Right now, as of September 30th, there's 83,000 in the non-uniform and $110,000 in the uniform pension. And right now, they're moving about $49,000 out of the uniform pension plan to the retirees and about $34,000 out of the non-uniform to the retirees. So that's the reason why she may have some cash there sitting on the side there to go to the trustee.
Yeah, so I guess Ken, Tom was referring to page 3 that has a separate line for cash.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mhm.
do you have any thoughts? Do we need that line, or what should that line say, based on your experience?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Well, the language, cash is considered a sub-allocation of the fixed income asset class. I think that's appropriate for this document myself.
Okay, that
Because
works for me.
I agree with the rest of the committee. You want to keep this IPS as generic as possible.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you don't want to tie anything down, going into, future PAC committee members. Because, I would think that this, you want to keep the IPS, in my opinion, a living, breathing document that you're going to be, reviewing, let's say every 3 years or something to that effect.
Right.
Mhm.
And we had a document that just grew stale. It's from 2011. That's 9 years ago. A lot of water's gone underneath the bridge in 9 years.
Mhm.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I
so-
agree. I
so-
mean, I think you could even, Tom could even just put, could just say simply fixed income and cash on that one line and leave it.
Yeah,
The only thing I'll caution is right now operationally, we know that Deb has to kind of segregate cash because we're paying out retirees, and you just don't know if you change advisors, are you going to be looking at different platforms where the operations will change? And, we may have to look at the IPS if we do have to segregate, a certain amount of cash for the payouts, because it does affect the investment policy. If you're, I don't know how it's going to work if we move away from Deb Breedy. She has us set up with SEI and Commonwealth and sort of piecemeal structure over the years. Just kind of bolted on or left the SEI there to keep fees low. And I have a feeling if we go to market, we're going to see different platforms come to us.
Yeah.
And in that case,
Yeah.
we may have to look at the nuance of the IPS related to an advisor we choose, that's all. Or vice versa, we may have an advisor that we like that, doesn't conform to what we want them to with the IPS, so that has to dominate.
And a simple amendment changes
Yeah.
the IPS.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it's
Always,
just a starting point.
you got it. You can always change it. Certainly the Board of Supervisors needs to be in agreement. But I don't see it being difficult. So Tom, you did a great job. Thank you for that.
yeah. And
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
I'm sorry, and just one more thing, I was listening to everybody at the beginning as far as, where does the buck stop as far as the pensions are concerned? And it's been my experience that the Board of Supervisors have the fiduciary responsibility as far as the pension plans are concerned. So I hopped out and was reading through the ordinances, and if you come upon paragraph 2825, it does reference, this Board of Supervisors and the duties and responsibilities of the Pension Advisory Committee. That is something that, may be addressed down the road to streamline it, because the last amendment was from 2003, which according to my calculations was 17 years ago. So
That's something to look at.
So,
And, you know,
okay, yeah.
going back to this IPS, you know, like I said, I don't mean to be redundant, you know, you want a generic document that's going to be living and breathing because, you know, everybody's doing a fantastic job that's on this committee. But to be honest with you, you know, um, the committee members are going to be pursuing their bucket lists in the next 3 to 5 years as far as what they want to do, you know, and they'll be off the committee.
Right.
So.
Yep.
Just a, you know, comment from me. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so I think we've covered this pretty thoroughly. Joe, go ahead.
Continuous improvement, Ken.
There you go.
We're always trying to get better.
That's right. All right,
Absolutely.
so moving on. We're done
Moving
with
on.
the IPS. We're done with the
Continuous
IPS.
improvement. Let's go.
Okay, enough. IPS is done. All right, so just real quick, the last item under old business is the adjustment to the standard reports. I think we have something set up Friday. Is it this Friday, Stephanie? I've lost track.
16th. Monday,
It's Monday.
3 o'clock.
16th at 3 o'clock.
Monday, 16th. Okay. All right, so that's happening then. All right, so moving on to new business, the third quarter pension monitoring report. So has everyone had a chance to take a look at it?
Mhm.
And I know, Tom, thanks for sending out your summary. Well, maybe I'll start with, I'll start quickly with my own personal comments. I personally thought, and Tom touched on it, I personally thought that the returns, the year-to-date returns were really low. You know, for the uniform, they were minus 0.83%. For the non-uniform is minus 0.94. You know, as Joe's brought up many times, the contributions coming in are almost going totally to the withdrawals, and so we're kind of treading water. You know, we're doing a little bit better than treading water, but not too much better than treading water. The performance versus a blended benchmark, well under. And then on the that Morningstar hypothetical portfolio, for the 1 year was well under, and it was well under for both portfolios. Now, I've mentioned this from time to time, is that I have, similar to the township, I have my retirement assets invested 65-35. I have half at Vanguard and I have half at Fidelity. And my personal returns year to date, 65-35. In Ed Denton's Fidelity account, I got 4%. And in my Vanguard account, I got 12% year to date. Year on year, Ed Denton's Fidelity account got 10%, and my Vanguard account got 18%. And a lot of those numbers align with the benchmark that Tom referenced. I think he said that the year trailing was, the benchmark was 9.2%. So, you know, my observation is we continue to underperform, in my personal opinion. So anyway, those are my comments. Joe?
If they're your personal returns, then why shouldn't Breedy be close to those?
I think she should be better than
She's a professional.
She should be better than my returns. Because I mean,
or equal to.
Well, then better. I mean, be perfectly honest, my Fidelity account, I really don't do too much with it. I invest 65-35%, and it's nothing scientific. But the Vanguard account I do have an investment advisor, which I pay 1/3% to, but they're not doing anything fancy either. So, you know, it's just, so anyway, those are my comments. Go ahead, Joe.
I think, Ed, that leads us to one of the items that are on the agenda, if not tonight, but a future agenda item, which is an RFP to get quotes.
That's next year's objective. That's a 2021 objective.
Correct.
So we'll cover that beginning in January. We'll figure out what we're going to do. Any other comments, Joe?
I was going to say, I've been the advocate of this reference policy benchmark out of the beauty of its simplicity.
Right.
It's two instruments: stock, global equities, a very generic, mostly U.S. A fixed income side, and you cited the numbers, Ed. So that I don't want to, maybe what I say a baseline. Should be a baseline expectation, and so that's why it's important to have that out there, because it took me a half hour to go through the report to write that email.
Mm-hmm.
Because what should typically be this, it was a September 30th report. I would assume that's a third quarter report. So you start out speaking of third quarter performance against benchmark, year-to-date performance against benchmark. Trailing 1 year, I think that's relevant. Maybe some others may not think that's relevant. But I had to dig pretty deep to pull those numbers out. And so we get this blended benchmark, particularly on the quarter to date, is a different number than the hypothetical benchmark that we see later in the document. So I
Yeah, I
can't
noticed
explain why there's two different benchmark numbers there.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this should be on one chart on page 1 of the report, right in front of us.
Right.
There's no narrative whatsoever on explaining the performance. We get market commentary, and that's fine. Market commentary is helpful, and obviously for many many readers who are not engaged in the market and follow things closely, that's perfectly fine. But not a single mention of we underperformed because of this, that, or the other. I actually went through the exercise, Ed, of doing a contribution to return, which will be a topic of our call next week with
Right.
the advisor.
Yep.
And it was kind of revealing on a year-to-date basis, but I was able to pull out the top on a year-to-date basis on a contribution to return. Now, this is not benchmark. This is just what investments contributed our top 5 and our bottom 5. The top 5 were S&P Growth, S&P Blend, LIBOR 3-month, which is a fixed income strategy, non-dollar fixed income strategy, and Barclays US Universe, also a fixed income strategy. The bottom 5 that hurt us were S&P Value, EFA, which is Europe, so the European part of the international, of the global equities, S&P Mid Cap Value, S&P Small Cap Value, and one of the real estate REITs hurt us. Now that's very revealing and could be the basis of a whole other discussion with the advisor, but that is not evident. It is not evident from this report. So that's something we have to drill down on to find out. Underperforming by a handful of basis points and periodically, of course, it's on a quarter-to-quarter basis, it's going to happen. But if there's a pattern of substantial underperformance, and again, we've got this high level, I want to say brainless reference benchmark, because it's only 2 instruments and you don't, you just put money in 65-35 in each, and it is beating the pants off of the portfolios. Well, that's something that has to be dealt with.
Yeah, I agree. I have my own personal benchmark. It's the Vanguard Life Strategy Growth, which is 60-40. And that had a year-on-year increase of 9%.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's almost double what the township's getting. Anyway, Bob, thoughts?
No, I think, bad returns and expensive. We're paying a lot of money also for an advisor service.
Mhm.
Colleen?
Yeah, I think, as Tom noted, I noticed that what they put as their blended benchmark was not matching what the Morningstar report showed, and I thought they were lifting right from there, which I thought was odd. And this is what I do for a living, right? You have to spend a lot of time in there trying to figure out, well, who detracted, who contributed, what asset class is working well for us. None of it really matters on the immediate side because we're not going to make a change necessarily, but you do need to know that as a committee. You need to know what contributed and what detracted. And the only commentary we got was a page that really, fixed income killed us through September. And remember, this report is through September. And I don't know what you and Joe, what your statements are. You're saying your performance was 8%. Was that year to date through yesterday, or was it through September 30th? Because we're only looking through September 30th. So it's hard when you say, oh, I did this and she did that in terms of performance. I find that difficult because I need to look.
Oh, mine was for the same time period, the exact same time
Okay,
period.
because that's always step one, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yes, I think bottom line, we know we're going to market for an advisor. I believe doing so will bring our fees down because any advisor is going to come in there and ask for less money to get this account. I think Deb's been making good money on this account, and she's done pretty well. But short term, this performance is anemic. And
I would disagree with that. I don't think she has done, at least the numbers I've seen. I don't think she has done very well.
I think overall she's done fine.
Really?
This quarter's terrible, but okay. So that being said, we have to deal with what she's given. We've asked her over and over how to best report to us, and I think you guys will go back to her one more time, get what you need, and in the meantime, we all know we're going to market. So
Well, that's right. And part of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to, not only is this what we're asking, this is articulating what we think the township should be receiving in terms of a report from her or from a future advisor. Go ahead, John.
I think what we need to do is, given all the other things, get the investment policy in place and then react accordingly. Okay, everything else is superfluous. So I think conversations about where we're at, what we're investing in, again is superfluous. The market went up like 1,200 points today. Okay, you just can't. I'm sorry, but you just can't identify what's going on. You need an IPS, and that's my bottom line.
Well, we need A, an IPS, which we talked about. B, we need an enhanced, new and improved performance report, which we're going to talk to about her next week. And then we're going to move on with the other stuff we talked about, including the RFP. So I think we're all on the same page. So, Colleen, any other thoughts on the report of the performance, Ryan?
No, it's not uncommon for her to be reactionary. So, like I said, she has a whole commentary on fixed income and changes she made and funds, that she bought and sold. And that was about all we got in terms of her position on our portfolio. So, but I know, we're only really asking her to come and do that, twice a year, once with the committee and once with all of us with the board, correct?
So I would just as a last comment footnote on that performance. So I grouped for year to date the entire equity performance and the fixed income separately, which is one of our asks out of this
Yeah.
meeting next week.
Yeah.
And again, this is contribution to performance. This is not even looking at benchmarks. The equities is what hurt us. A negative 151 basis points contribution from equities and a positive 69 from fixed income, for a net of 82, according to my numbers. My numbers are not exact, they're not audited or anything. But we got to the same, basically 40 basis points underperformance relative to the uniform plan. And so the equity side is passive, but we're invested in multiple strategies at different allocations. And that is having the effect on performance. It's not the passive versus active. It's the allocation between growth and value and mid and small and overweight real estate. So I'm not going to belabor that issue, but these are things, the level, maybe 2 levels below the surface, that are not obvious, but we need to be aware of.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at just, like you said, it's hard to glean from here what's contributed, what's detracted. And I start by looking at our fund versus the benchmark in page like 24 of her report. And you start to see what funds are underperforming their benchmark.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're right, you have to look at that as related to the overall allocation of the portfolio. I didn't get that far.
Because the funds could be outperforming their benchmark, but if
Yeah,
the
but not a
benchmark
big
is
part of the
underperforming, our larger needs of 65, 35, that's the issue.
Yeah.
That's an issue.
Yep. Mhm.
So I think just kind of wrapping this up is that when we talk with her on Monday, what I don't think it'd be a good idea, we're not going to really grill her on performance, right?
No, I don't think that's.
Yeah, we're just strictly going to articulate what we'd like to see in a report.
Yeah.
And specifically, going forward, and ideally would like to see this for the December 31st report.
Yeah. It's definitely appropriate to ask her about what she's thinking in terms of where the portfolio is detracted and contributed. That's absolutely appropriate anytime you talk to your advisor.
Yeah, right.
But you don't want to beat her over the head for, this last quarter of performance, especially in this market. I mean, the VIX is just ridiculous. So, but yeah, I think that's a great approach. And she's, at this point, we're either going to get it right she's going to get it right for us, or she isn't, because she's done this now 3 times.
Right, and also what we want to get is the historic returns year by year for the last 10 years. If we get nothing else, I'd like to get that.
That would be good. That would be good to see. Yep.
And then that way we can see, hopefully it's well above 8% year after year, and we'll keep her. But my guess is that it isn't. So anyway, anything else on this? All right. Okay, so I think that we covered our agenda. So so next month we'll Tom will again be doing we really appreciate it, Tom. Everybody give Tom a clap on all his efforts on this. We really appreciate it. And
My
so
pleasure.
we'll look at the IPS next month. We'll talk a little bit more about the stuff we were talking about today. Well, maybe let's get the IPS done, but if we have time next month, I'd like to talk about next steps in terms of, what other documents should be in place, contracts, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should get ready to start the RFP first quarter. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, that's I think at least my thinking. Well, maybe we can talk about next month is we can talk about our 2022 objectives.
Yeah.
And certainly high on the list would be the RFP.
Right, and maybe if we can strategize a timeline. When do we put it on the street? When are we going to do interviews? So everybody kind of knows in their calendar as well what it's going to take the year, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it's going to have to be collaborative. But it's not just us. It's really the township, right, Stephanie?
Yeah. Staff absolutely needs to be involved. Yeah.
Don't underestimate the complexities of an RFP. I came from the UN where RFPs were standard, and it takes a long time.
Yeah.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
Second.
Second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good day.
All right.
Done for
Thanks,
another month.
everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Thanks a lot,
all.
everyone.
Good night.
You-
Right.
Night.